My name's Ernie from the Fungal Network, when he was talking about mushroom growing kits at home, that's kind of what we do now. We were a mushroom farm, now we're a mushroom lab. So if you're interested in growing your own mushrooms at home, we got $7 kits that you can make yourself at home. They work great. I've got lion's manes growing in my living room right now, and I had oyster mushroom ramen last night. It's pretty easy. It's a good thing to do. Growing on logs is a good thing to do if you just want to have your own. But foraging is also a really good thing to do. And that's the other thing that we do. I teach, I do a certification class for people that want to be able to sell wild mushrooms in the state. Anyway, you can find information about that if you're interested at fungalnetwork.net. We've got a presentation here where we can finally get into some of the real specifics. I got one of these light box things for people that sell on Etsy and stuff, so they can take pretty pictures. I got it to take pretty pictures of mushrooms. They're so pretty. These chanterelles are beautiful. I like this picture because you can really see these false gills. Just that they're basically just wrinkles on the underside of that chanterelle. Down, there we go. We've already talked about this. This is my family. My kids grew up picking stuff up out of the woods and eating it. I always tell them, if something drops on the floor of Walmart, you leave it. If you find something on the floor of the woods, you pick it up and eat it. There's good dirt and there's bad dirt. Walmart dirt is bad dirt. So not eating stuff that'll kill your son. I'm going to skip most of this because we've already gone over this, but I want to start here. Don't eat anything that you can't positively identify. And I know a lot of people. I know John uses Facebook a lot, and I know a lot of people do. Personally, I'm opposed on a moral level to being on Facebook, but on a more useful level, there are so many people on Facebook that get social credibility from being on Facebook. Our interests don't align. So you may get on Facebook wanting to identify mushrooms, and you're going there because people that are experts are there. But it could be that their interest is not so much to help you identify mushrooms as it is to get an endorphin kick from feeling like they're an expert. And so that's why you have, in my view, I'm really opposed. I actually really like iNaturalist, not so much as an identification tool, but just as a record-keeping tool. It's nice to be able to see where and when people are finding mushrooms. So like if I'm deciding, do I want to start looking for maitake yet, I'll get on iNaturalist and see if people are finding maitake and posting it. And it's really useful for a lot of plants and insects too. If you're spending time in the woods, you shouldn't limit yourself to mushrooms. There's a lot of cool stuff out there. Let's see, common bad guys. I'm gonna say, first of all, I recommend not messing with any amanitas. There are some edible amanitas that a lot of people do eat, but I would, if you're starting out collecting and eating mushrooms, I would start out from a place of what are my goals and what is the safest way to achieve my goals, and don't get overwhelmed by the availability of mushrooms out there. I mean, 3,000 species of mushrooms is a lot, but you don't need to know them all. There's a lot of ways to know things. There are people, and you'll find them on Facebook, whose whole goal is to know the names of lots of things. Well, the naming of something is different than the knowing of something. Right? I saw an article the other day about some guy who was able to memorize like 80 80 numbers in sequence in 13 and a half seconds to win a competition. Well, that's great, good for him, but that's not really useful for, for most people. Knowing scientific names of things, and there's a lot of scientists who do this, who think that because they know the names of things, they know things. My background is I'm a marine biologist, and I used to spend a lot of time talking to commercial fishermen who were very resentful of people like me, who went and got graduate degrees and think we knew something about the ocean because we knew a lot of scientific names. And it's different. I like to think of myself now as a naturalist more than as a scientist, and I think that's a good approach to have as a mushroom forager. Is learning a few things, learning them well, having a real personal relationship with them. Don't focus on just names. So Amanitas, the way you avoid Amanitas is by looking for that bulbous base. Amanitas hatch out of this egg. It's called a vulva. Sometimes you can find these unopened. They're really cool to find. If you find what looks like it might be a reptile egg at the top of the soil and you pull it out of there, you'll find generally that it has little threads connecting it down into the soil. Those are the hyphae that are spreading out through the ground. And if you cut it open, you'll see inside of there this baby mushroom. It's cool to find, and it's exciting to find Amanitas. I love finding them. But they are, some of them are deadly. None of them are so good to eat that it's worth making that an early mushroom. I recommend having a list of 5 or 10 mushrooms at the beginning and say, these are the ones that I will eat if I find them and positively identify them. And then as you get more comfortable, maybe get more adventurous, but it's called second order decision making, where you decide ahead of time what decision you'll make if a situation arises. Many of us do that by getting married. Getting married is a second order decision where you say, I'm not going to decide every time I meet somebody whether that's somebody I want a relationship with. And so I recommend doing the same thing with mushrooms, where you say ahead of time, here are the mushrooms I'm willing to have a culinary relationship with. And then if you come across them, that's awesome. So in addition to Amanitas are the big ones. What's interesting, these destroying angels and death caps are the most common killers in the United States, and a lot of times it's people that came here from Asia, that emigrated from an Asian country where there's a similar looking, widely eaten mushroom. Like if you've eaten Thai food with mushrooms, a lot of times you'll see these patty straw mushrooms look like they're in an egg that's cut open. And so a lot of times those are the people that get killed by them. But there are other parasol mushrooms, and John said this, parasol mushrooms that are growing in your yard, if you just avoid them, you'll be okay. Because they can look a lot like some of the agaricus, for example. In addition to the Amanitas, the other one that a lot of people find, I actually know somebody who was a regular customer of ours at the farmer's market who ate green spored parasol at one time. He said, by the way, they taste great. By his estimation, he had a half hour or so of really enjoying his meal before the bad times. But green spored parasols, these are the ones that form those fairy rings in your yard. And they're super cool to see because they expand every year. And what you're actually seeing, when John told you that the mushrooms are the fruits, what's actually happening is the fungus that the fruits are growing from is spreading through the soil, eating just stuff in there, dead stuff, breaking it down. Every year, they spread further and further and further out, and it fruits around the edge. So every year, the ring gets a little bit bigger. But this is one of the cases where, on the right side here, this is a spore print, and this is a case where it's really fun to do a spore print. They have real obvious green spores, and you can see it if they get old enough to where they're releasing the spores, they'll look dark green up underneath of there. But again, something to avoid, and I've only ever found these in the yard. I've never found these in the woods. I mean, presumably they existed before people started building yards, but I've never found them in the woods. So there you go. Anyway, yeah, avoid those. This is, so the Amanitas, the number one killer. Green spored parasol, one of the two most common sickeners. It bears mentioning here that if you eat something and then get sick within a couple hours, you're going to be okay. But you still probably ought to go to the ER, because especially if you've got some other confounding factor, you could get sick enough that you might need to get hydrated. You might need an IV or something. But you're probably going to be okay, but you'll probably spend a lot of time sitting on the toilet with a pot on your lap, losing everything inside you. It'll make you really miserable. But that's, I say that just so you know, if you get sick within a few hours of eating, that's a good thing. If it takes you like 12 hours or more to get sick after you ate mushrooms, that's a really bad thing, and you may well die. So the ones that'll kill you, it takes hours for them to start making you sick. The other big sickener is these jack-o'-lanterns that John talked about. Vivid orange, large clusters. Flesh is the same orange inside. They're just orange, 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 everywhere orange. And they do sometimes grow. Actually, John, that was a cool picture where there was 3 of them growing together, because you can. Chanterelles grow generally individual, but it's not uncommon to find 3 of them together. But jack-o'-lanterns do often grow in bigger packages than that, overlapping. And they definitely have those true gills. What everybody will tell you about jack-o'-lanterns is they glow in the dark. Everybody who knows anything, that's like their number one trivia fact. I've never seen it. I've tried to see it. We've collected the freshest ones we could find and taken them home and gotten in the bathroom, turned the lights out, waited 10 minutes. I've never seen it. All the pictures you see, it's like the aurora. Did anybody see the aurora last year? Yeah. We got some great pictures by using like night photo setting where it collects for a long time. It looked way better in the pictures than it did in the naked eye. I think all the pictures you see of jack-o'-lanterns bioluminescent, it's a lengthy exposure. But anyway, these jack-o'-lanterns, sharp, true gills, grow at the base of trees. If you can avoid those three things, jack-o'-lanterns, the green-spored parasols, and any amanita, you'll probably be okay. But the other thing to be aware of is that some people just get sick from eating mushrooms, just like some people just get sick from eating peanuts. And if you cook a meal that has 35 ingredients between vegetables and grains and spices, and also has a mushroom, and someone gets sick after they eat it, it's the mushroom, right? Guaranteed they're going to say it was the mushroom. Might be, might not be. But so it's especially important, because mushrooms will get blamed for any time people get sick. It's especially important to know what you're doing. And John mentioned not eating them raw, but I'm going to say it again. Chicken of the woods will make you vomit if you don't cook it well enough. It just will. Some mushrooms, honey mushrooms, will make my wife violently ill no matter how they're cooked. And a not insignificant number of people will get sick from eating honey mushrooms. I don't think they should be on North Carolina's approved list of mushrooms because of that. But cook them well, eat a little bit first, and if they happen to make you sick, they happen to make you sick. Move on with your life and leave them alone. And you know, and It's where if you know what you're doing, and you know you've positively identified things, then you can make smart decisions. All right, so viewing it, we've already gone over a lot of this. Time of year, location, fertile surface. Yeah, this is, I put this picture in here because there's a carrion beetle right next to the steeple. Right, I love that the carrion beetle is attracted to it. Yeah, it's a dog stinkhorn. So identifying trees and other plants helps, makes footprints, dichotomous key. All those are good things. I'm going to say again, you should get How to Forage for Mushrooms Without Dying. It's the best $15 you'll spend. It's absolutely worth getting, and for beginning, for just getting started, it's worth having. Already talked about that. All right, some good ones to know. Morels, first mushroom of the spring. I've got relatives that are farmers out in Kansas, and every spring they go out with 5-gallon buckets to collect morels, and they fill them up and they go out multiple weekends. You're not going to do that around here, but we do pretty good. We're more like squirrels than we think we are. You know, squirrels hide stuff everywhere and they find it. You don't think you have a good memory maybe, but I'm here to tell you, you're going to remember. The first place you find morels, you're going to remember it, and next year, you're going to be able to find that spot, and then you're going to find some more spots, and pretty soon, you're going to have a mental map full of specific trees and specific forests and what mushrooms you found on them. And ideally, you took pictures so you can remember when. I'm lousy at remembering when, but I'm really good at remembering spots. So first mushroom of the spring, these are going to start showing up 1 month from now. It used to be traditionally early April. You know, the traditional Appalachian thing is when the leaves on the oak are the size of a mouse's ear, that's when you start looking for morels. Well, it's getting earlier and earlier. So like last year, I think March 22nd, I think, is when we found our first morels up at our farm at the base of Pilot Mountain. And we're a little bit behind where you guys are down here. You get down further down to the Uwaris and stuff, they'll be even a little bit earlier than that. But by the beginning of April, it'll be happening. So this is a great one to know. Everybody's excited about them. Key identifiers, the first key identifier is springtime. If it's not springtime, you didn't find a morel. The ridges on the cap, it doesn't have the typical other stuff. It doesn't have pores underneath, it doesn't have gills, it doesn't have teeth. In fact, morels are really cool because they are more closely related to athlete's foot than they are to any of the other mushrooms that we're going to talk about. They're one of the sac fungi. They're completely unrelated to everything else. So that's kind of interesting. It's not really a selling point, but it's interesting. They're completely hollow from the stem all the way up through. So if you cut it open, you'll be able to see it's got a nice smooth inside surface, hollow all the way up through that cap. I didn't say much in this presentation about it, but I want to add to this, morels are toxic. This is another one that you have to cook these well. And you may have heard last year about that restaurant in, is it Idaho, where a bunch of people got sick and several people died from eating morels. And of course, not knowing anything about it, a lot of the news that reported it made a lot out of the fact that the morels that they were eating were imported from China, and less out of the fact that the chef that prepared the mushrooms didn't cook them thoroughly. Some of them were served entirely raw. The others were served after having been soaked in like a warm solution for a few hours, but they weren't really cooked. Morels are toxic, and in fact, The toxins, well, if you actually look at the literature on it, not even 100% certain what is actually toxic in them. But likely it is something that comes out as a gas when you cook it. So like we always make sure we use the hood, we turn that on when we're cooking. But cook them thoroughly before you eat them because they will make you sick and they can kill you. Chanterelles, there's a lot of different kinds, but all of them, the important thing is the false gills. The gills are not sharp, straight, and parallel, more ridge-like and forking and extend down the stem. They do generally have a white inside of the stem, but over time they bruise orange. If you've picked them and left them in your basket for a while, if they're just kind of old, they'll be orange all the way through. But they will, well, they'll generally have a solid stem, but a lot of times they'll have bugs that eat up through the middle to where it'll look like it's a hollow stem too. But the gills are going to be a giveaway. They say they smell like apricots. They do smell kind of fruity, but the first time I ever foraged in Oregon 25 years ago when I was working on the coast as a marine biologist, we had at this marine science center I worked at, we actually had a forest service guy working there who was a mushroom expert, and we started bringing in, we'd go over the weekend, we'd go hiking in the woods and bring in mushrooms for this guy to help us identify. The first time we brought in chanterelles, turned out we had a bag full of false chanterelles, and they smelled like apricots. They smelled delicious. Jack-o'-lanterns smell delicious. They smell really good. So I don't, smell is not a good characteristic to go by, but they do smell good. Yeah.
That picture you showed before with the chanterelles in, with some moss, is that a characteristic of where some of them are, that picture on?
Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I found some cinnabars and they were in moss like that.
Yeah, cinnabars quite often you'll find that way. The true chanterelles less so, but they can be. Generally, to find them on our farm, we've got a little branch creek that's not quite dry in the dry season, but almost, and it's a pretty steep hillside going down to it, and that whole hillside is probably a 150-yard length area. We'll pull 200, 250 pounds of chanterelles out of there in a season. And it's just, they're just...
What was the aspect of the hill?
Southwest facing mostly, but all back through there. I mean, it's, I hesitate to give any guidance on it because it's a mixed hardwood forest that stays protected from sunlight. Chanterelles love the heat. They're going to get started early June, and when it gets to be 95 degrees out, they're going to be cranking. And they're going to go from being like in the upper left here, where they look pretty compact and they're pretty heavy bodied. By the time it gets into like late June, July, and things get really hot, they're going to be opening. They're going to be opening up like this. They're going to be really flowery, and you may find some that are over half a pound, a single chanterelle. I mean, they can be massive.
So you say it starts around here, like the 1st of June?
1st of June, you'll start finding them.
Depending on if we get some rain, because usually...
the rain. What'll happen a lot of times is, like last year, right when they started, we got a dry spell.
Yeah, the rain cuts off, like, right there in May, and it's just off.
Yeah, it really all depends. In 2018, we were selling mushrooms at Cobblestone Farmers Market, and we had chanterelles at the market every single week from the first week of June till the 2nd or 3rd week of October. And so if the rains keep up, they're there all the time. It's just a matter.
If we were just so dry last year.
It's all weather thing, but you know, when the rains finally did kick in, there were chanterelles everywhere, there's chicken woods everywhere. The next one, we're gonna talk about the black trumpets, were everywhere.
I think those rains were like, what, mid-August? That was when we finally got some.
I think we had late July, I think we had a little bit of something, and then later in August, we had a lot, yeah.
It was about a month without rain from July
It was
forward.
right.
So it might have been like first week of August.
Yeah, it's all, I mean, again, back to what your goals are. If you set your goals pretty low, I'm gonna get out in the woods, and hopefully I'll find some mushrooms, but if I don't, I'm at least gonna be in the woods, and I'll hear some birds, and I gotta tell you, one time I was out mushroom hunting, up in the National Forest in Virginia, and I was cutting a beefsteak off a tree at about chest level, and I heard something coming through the woods, and I put my head around the side of the tree, and here come this young fawn, just still barely had spots on it, and came trotting right by me. He was all wild-eyed, trotting by me, obviously exhausted, and it was maybe 10 yards away, and it went on down the hill, and I pulled back around, went back to cutting on this beefsteak. I heard something else, and put my head back around, here comes a coyote that was loping along, and it looked super comfortable. It looked like it was gonna run forever, but it was chasing down that fawn. I was like, oh, that fawn's not long for the world. But again, like 10 yards away, had no idea it was there, that I was there, because it was focused, but just being out there, man, being present, even if you're not finding mushrooms, there's so much out there. So sometimes things are dry.
Oh yeah, I'm just saying, last year was a unique year.
It was kind of a bummer, but it ended up pretty good anyway. Yeah. Anyway, grow individually, sometimes in twos, from the ground. They're mycorrhizal, they grow in association with plant roots. They give those plants nutrients that they collect from the soil, and the plants give them some of the sugars that they're making from carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. Black trumpets, these are a cool one. They're really hard to find. A lot of mushrooms. This is one where you need to prime the pump. As soon as you prime the pump and find the first one, then you'll find them everywhere. Morels are that way too. I recommend with morels, we didn't get into the detail I should have here, but with morels, get on your hands and knees, get down sideways, look sideways. People will tell you, everybody's got an idea of where to find them. Some people say old apple orchards, some people say after a fire's gone through the forest, some people say around poplars. Everybody's got something. Choose to believe one of them. It doesn't matter what you choose to believe, but go to those areas and start looking real close, and get down on your hands and knees and look sideways, and you're gonna find a morel eventually. And when you do, stop what you're doing, drop to the ground, and start looking everywhere, and you're gonna find that they're everywhere. Last year, we added a spot that I never found morels in, but we walk by all the time, but we just happened to see one. And as soon as we happened to see one, my wife and I start crawling around on our hands and knees, and holy cow, there's more. And my wife ended up, it's okay to tell this, my wife ended up taking her bra off and filled up her bra so we could carry him, because we didn't have a way to carry him. And pretty quick, there was too much. And so I had to take my shirt off and tied off the neck of my shirt, and we just used my shirt like a sack. And we got a lot of them. But it was all because we found those first ones.
Were y'all both butt naked by the time?
You do what you gotta do.
It was on our farm. But what go back to what John said, the surest way to find them is to not have any way to carry them. But really, it's just finding them. We found our biggest patch we ever found was at the edge of a field in a bunch of blackberry canes. Nobody tells you find morels and blackberry canes at the edge of a field, but that's where we found our biggest bunch, and now we know every year we look there. So just keep your eyes open, be observant.
One quick note on that, with any mycorrhizal species, morels or chanterelles or whatever, when I find the first one, I drop my bag right there and I'll hunt like a 50-foot minimum radius around that, cause that's, you almost always will find more, like that's your best spot to focus your attention on.
That's it, yeah. Black trumpets, these are so hard to find, but again, once you find them, they're a cool one. These are, so chanterelles, the best way to use them, in my view, chanterelles are the summer mushroom. They are great on pasta, where you just use pasta and whatever little bits of vegetables you're getting out of your garden or at the farmer's market, whatever's fresh. Cook them in a hot, dry pan, all mushrooms. Hot, dry pan, don't use oil, don't use butter, don't use anything. Use a hot, dry pan, let them release all their water and start sticking to the bottom, and then you add your butter or your oil, your olive oil, a little bit of garlic, salt, pepper, hot sauce, whatever. But chanterelles, great on a summer pasta. We always reserve back some of the pasta water that we'll mix in with our kind of flash sauteed vegetables and the chanterelles, just to make kind of a sauce in there. That's the best way. Black trumpets, these are seasoning. These things are hollow, they're really thin. They're so light that they were the one mushroom that when we sold them at the farmer's market, we sold them by the ounce instead of by the pound, because they're super light. If you found a pound of black trumpets, it would fill your bag pretty much. But they're a cool one to find. They're very fragrant, very flavorful, thin, papery flesh, hollow all the way through. So when you cut them, I recommend cutting all your mushrooms. I don't recommend picking them. I recommend cutting. And I don't have one of those fancy knives, but my wife does, and my son does. They're cool. I just use a regular knife. I keep kind of a big one clipped onto my backpack, and I got a smaller one that I can keep in my pocket. But I recommend cutting your mushrooms to keep them clean. If you can clean them before you put them in your basket, you're saving yourself a lot of effort down the road. But with these, when you cut them and hold them up and look, you look all the way through them. They're hollow like a trumpet. They're an exciting one to find. There's a couple of species of them.
Where do you usually find them?
Well, usually around the base of oaks. Well, actually, where we usually find them, if we're not looking specifically for them, is on the side of a trail growing in moss. And I think that's because they show up there. But once we happen to find them growing in that moss, then we drop down and start looking. And around oak trees, we'll find them. The bigger species, the Fetidus, we'll find like right at the edge of, we've got a mixed area that has some pine. Right at the edge of that pine, we'll find lots of those Fetidus.
With the black trumpets, do you have any secret to keep the sand, get the sand out of the center of them?
Don't pick them in a sandy area. No, there's no secret. I mean, you cut them. You can rinse them before you use them. I don't like to rinse stuff. The only things we rinse, I do rinse morels because they're always full of whatever they pushed up through is usually kind of sandy. We rinse maitake before we use them. Yeah.
I've got an electric toothbrush, and it's got we can take the tip off and put it, there's a tip on, so I've got one that's for cleaning mushrooms, and it's soft enough, you can get on the trumpet mushrooms, and it doesn't tear them to pieces, and really gets off the sand if it's not super caked on there.
Nice.
Yeah,
No, it was in the center of them, I guess, and so I thought about sliding, cutting down the center and kind of brushing it out or something, but whatever it was, we didn't get it all out, so we were still chewing sand as we were eating them. They were delicious, so we didn't care.
These black trumpets tend to be really small and really light, and it takes so many of them when you eat. It takes so many of them. It will, your head will spin off your neck if you try to clean each of those individually, you
Yeah.
know? So if you just, I mean, if they have some dirt in them, like I pick black trumpets a little higher. I cut them off a little higher, just to keep from having dirt in the first place. Chicken in the woods, we've got two species that grow around here. These get really big. This is one that I've found almost 50 pounds on a single stump one time. And just to put that in perspective, you know, we would sell these to restaurants for $15 a pound. So when you find 50 pounds, you found something, you know, that's pretty valuable. But the two species we have, the sulphureous or the sulfur shelf, like yellow, like sulfur, they're the ones with the yellow pores. And these are the ones you find growing up off of logs and high up off the ground. The other one has a white pore surface, is cincinnatus. And they tend to grow right here, up through the ground at the base of a tree. These ones are always full of, they've always incorporated the leaves and sticks that they're growing around. So you kind of need to cut those apart and yank the twigs and stuff out of them. Some people say they taste better. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't really noticed that much difference. They're all good.
How do you cook them, and what do you cook them in? I mean, what do you usually?
So chicken of the woods, first of all, they've got to be young and tender. If they are not actively wet when you cut them, in my view, they're not worth taking. You know, they should be starting to well up water when you slice it off of there. But the way you use them is the classic way to use them is like chicken. You guys familiar with Acadia Grill, Acadia Foods? Anyway, she used to be the chef at Cranky's, and she has this great recipe for chicken fried chicken in the woods, chicken biscuits, where they take chicken in the woods and buttermilk batter and make these chicken in the woods biscuits out of it. It's spectacular. That's the best way to have these, in my view, is to treat them like chicken. We do a triple dredge buttermilk batter recipe when we make them, and they're great that way. To me, the great thing about these is you can find 50 pounds of them. You can use 5 pounds, sell a bunch or give away a bunch, and take a whole bunch more and just stick it in the freezer in a Ziploc and it'll be fine. You don't even have to parboil these first. They're great that way. Other ones you have to parboil. Most of them you have to do something with. If you just took like an oyster mushroom and froze it and thawed it out, the cells would burst when you froze it, and when you thawed it out, it would become a mush pile. It would be kind of gross, but that's the classic way, is using them as chicken. That's the only way that I think they're exceptional, to be honest with you. Other than that, I generally don't love them in any other way we've tried them. But a lot of people love them. A lot of people are super excited about them. Key identifiers, they're orange and banded on top. Usually this is what you think you're finding when you see the jack-o'-lanterns through the woods, is you've been finding chicken in the woods and you see this orange at the base of a tree up the hill, and you go up the hill and find out you weren't seeing more chicken in the woods, you were seeing jack-o'-lantern. That's my experience. Grows in stacked layers, it's solid all the way through, pores underneath. You can find these in the spring. You can find them sometimes throughout the summer, but most commonly it would be spring and then late fall. I'll find them while I'm out hunting my talkies. I'll find usually my biggest hauls of chicken in the woods in the fall when I'm hunting my talkies.
So growing at the base of hardwood, dead trees or dying trees?
Yeah, on dead or dying trees. You'll find them a lot of times on downed logs. You know, the exception, this cincinnatus, this is the one, if you turn this over, it's going to be white underneath. They tend to be a little paler, a little less bright, and then underneath they're white instead of that yellow. And these ones do grow up out of the ground. And in my experience, they're never as big. We never find I've never found 20 pounds of the Cincinnatus. Oyster mushrooms, the classic, what we call the gateway gourmet mushroom. This is what gets people hooked on it. This is there are some lookalikes for oyster mushrooms. And again, back to setting your expectations early. You should make up your mind that anything that doesn't exactly match what you expect a classic mushroom of that species to be, you just won't eat. So sometimes, like it's really rare for oyster mushrooms to be like this, like 3 individuals happening to grow together. Usually it's more overlapping shelves like this. If you're a beginner and you find 3 of them growing together like this, just walk away from them, take a picture, whatever. It's not worth the mouthful of mushrooms, you know. You're not going to save your life if you're starving. You're not going to get a meal out of it. So your standard for oysters should be clusters of overlapping shelves with true gills that extend down the stalk. They grow on hardwood. They've got pale spores. These things, there are scientific studies that suggest that some of our weather patterns in the eastern United States are caused by spores from oyster mushrooms because they are so prolific. I took a group out of the people that got certified last year for the wild mushroom certification. I took a group out foraging, and I've got a little bit of video where we found a cluster of oysters, and you can see these clouds of spores dropping off of this cluster of oysters. They produce so much spores. And the downside of that